每屆紀錄劇場節都包含一個重點項目，就係海外考察。通過親身考察同唔同藝術家訪談，睇當地嘅演出，除咗可以認識海外唔同地方嘅紀錄劇場發展之外，更加可以認識當地社會情況。因為紀錄劇場同社會現實息息相關，通過劇場，我哋能夠更加認識一個地方、一個城市。今屆海外考察，藝術總監胡海輝同戲劇文學指導鄭迪琪分別去咗3個國家：西班牙、希臘同埋捷克。當中嘅4個城市：巴塞隆拿、馬德里、雅典同埋布拉格。呢幾個地方唔係以英語為主，對於香港觀眾嚟講都比較陌生。但係劇場活動其實非常活躍，城市入面隨處都係劇場。布拉格阿卡 Theatre 嘅總監 Andre 更加講笑咁話：人哋忙於建立國會，捷克人就忙於興建劇場。
I think theatre culture is very strong in Czech Republic, especially in Prague. The roots are somewhere in the beginning of 19th century already, so it's more than 200 years where we really have the theatre as one of the most important vehicles of development of Czech culture. And so, for instance, as I already said, in the 60s of 19th century, Hungarians were building the parliament and Czechs were building the national theatre. And in our revolution in 1989, the theatres played very important role, because not only that the students of the theatre faculty were the first students who went to the strike, but also the theatres were joining the students and stopped performing and transformed theatres to the places where people can learn about what happened in Prague and where they could meet and discuss how they want to change society.
雅典嘅2位創作人 Progimus 同 Anestus 都話，響雅典劇場觀眾仲多過電影觀眾。
We are in Athens. I don't know how long you have been here in Athens, but if you walk around, the season has started. Now if you check, we can check together on the laptop, there must be at least 500 shows running right now. And until the end of the season, 1,600 shows in a city of 3 million people, where outside of the city center there are no theaters. So it's all mostly in the city center. So it means that we have 1,500 shows, 2,000 shows a year in a season, which means there's a lot of people who go. Not all of them are in big houses like this.
And not all of them are very good.
Are very good or well visited. It's not the case. But in order to have so many shows, it means that someone is making a profit, so they continue doing it. And going to theater is more of a tradition here in Greece than going to the cinema, for example.
而響呢幾個地方，紀錄劇場都正係蓬勃發展。西班牙編劇 Raul 話
You can find a lot of verbatim theatre and a lot of documentary theatre. There are places specialized on that.
第1、2屆紀錄劇場節曾經考察過英國、美國、德國嘅紀錄劇場發展。原來今次訪問嘅幾位藝術家，佢哋當初接觸紀錄劇場，多少都係源自英、美、德呢幾個地方。西班牙編劇 Raul 第1個紀錄劇場劇本就係響英國讀書嘅時候寫成嘅。
I was living in London some time ago, and I get in contact with a theatre there that was working in Argentinian plays. As you know, Argentina has a very rough history, and they were creating a set of plays called Theatre for Identity. They are meant to be plays to remember what happened during the dictatorship there. So I was working in production. I was doing, bringing coffees and this kind of thing. And I learned a lot about how verbatim plays could make an impact on the audience. So I was studying a master's there, and I decided to do something similar, first in London and then back to Spain. And the first play I did was about FGM, which is female genitalia mutilation, which is a big issue in Europe, especially in the UK, because there were a lot of kids, especially girls from different backgrounds, when mutilated, and nobody got detained or nobody went to prison or anything like that. It was meant to be something cultural. So I joined up with a person there, and we started doing interviews with people that suffer this kind of thing or that worked in this area or performed this kind of mutilation. And the play was called Little Stitches. And then I started doing plays on historical memory here in Spain.
根據 Amado 所講，西班牙另一位紀錄劇場創作人 Lucia Miranda 就係喺美國嗰度取經。
Lucia Miranda, who is one of the most important playwriters and directors in this time, she has started maybe starting the 2009, or she and the group. The group is the Cross Borders Project. They haven't stopped, and they are very well known. And she comes from the United States. Her experience is from the United States.
Okay.
And she had seen and drunk the way of doing of Anya de Vere-Smith.
So I like people to discover things on the stage as it is happening in 100%.
至於啟發雅典兩位創作人 Ernestus 同 Proximus 着手做紀錄劇場嘅，就係德國著名嘅紀錄劇場劇團 Rimini Protocol。
I had seen some performances by Rimini Protocol when I was studying there, and I was very impressed by this way to narrate stories and to speak about the world and to speak about society and to speak about the social and political problems through this genre and through the way to develop new text for theater.
So we were working on the piece as assistant directors and assistant dramaturgs in 2010, and until then I knew Ernestus because we worked together, and he was staging classical text, new texts, current modern texts of Germany, European texts, Greek texts, and until then I was an actor. Then I moved to Athens, but when I was in Berlin I saw 100% Berlin. And I met Daniel Wetzel there, the one of the three Rimini Protocol members. And I told him, I'm moving to Athens, and the city is very ugly. And I need a reason to fall in love with the city. So please let me do 100% Athens. Okay. And he said, no, no, we have rights, we have copyrights. But if we ever do the show, we would like you to be our assistant. And then, because they can't do this show with one assistant, we were more assistant. This is how we worked together for the first time on this, from the same position in 2010. And we fell in love with this research, traveling in the city, meeting people you would never meet under different circumstances. And then we decided, and it was also an invitation from the Athens Epidaurus Festival to do a documentary theater performance the next year, and it was called Journey by Train.
曾經同 Ernestus Proximus 合作過嘅 Martha 都係受社會現實所吸引，加上佢修讀人類學嘅背景，令佢越嚟越多從事紀錄劇場創作。
I mean, I didn't wake up, obviously one day, having decided that I will do documentary theater. This is a kind of process that was revealed to me throughout the years. I had always have a fascination about documentary filmmaking, which is my great love in a sense. So I love cinema. I love its capability to reach out to wider audiences. I love the filmic language and the many possibilities that it opens up, technically speaking. And I love also the potential impact that filmmaking has on the audiences, on the level of societies. So that was there from the beginning, like almost more than 10 years ago when we decided to create our own production company, which today, Place to Place, which is the name of our production company, is split into 3 domains: filmmaking, TV series making, and theater making, and in particular documentary theater making. So before I dived into the fascinating territory of documentary theater, which is not a demarcated genre, no way, I mean, it's a very fluid territory, and every artist kind of perceives and explores it throughout different means and methodologies, and this is very productive and very healthy. But before I got there, I had this, tendency to look for an existing place that had some reality element in their core. So I remember, for example, that one of our first theater plays that we ever staged was Family Stories, written by Biljana Srbljanović, which is a Serbian playwright, and the play reflected on the sequences of the war in ex-Yugoslavia, for example. So that was there as well as a tendency to reach out to actual events, to what happens around us in the socio-political context. And then social anthropology came along, which is my scientific discipline, and everything kind of fell into place. Social anthropology and ethnography in particular, which is the methodological stream of social anthropology. So social anthropology made me consider what it means to open up a space of shared trust, of familiarity, of what I used to call shared vulnerability between the researcher and the community, which is under research in many brackets, because this is a reciprocal process at the end of the day. So these methodologies and these ethics of social anthropology, little by little, started to infuse my work in theater. I asked myself, why am I fascinated by this? And the answer was obvious to me, because I think that theater becomes more powerful when it touches upon the political through the human. When it bypasses the didactic or sometimes loud way it has to point out heavily charged socio-political issues, and chooses instead to highlight them through the subjective perspective of an experience of other people. So I entered this trip, and it felt relevant to my ethics. It felt relevant to the tools that I was interested to explore, and this is something that brought me here today.
布拉格厄克 Theatre 藝術總監 Yana 嘅戲劇之路，雖然由偶戲表演開始，但係佢同樣都係被社會現實吸引，逐漸走上紀錄劇場嘅道路。
Myself, looking backwards, in my life, I studied puppetry, which probably does not have anything in common with documentary theater, but looking at it, for me, it meant to be close to people, speak directly, because maybe you can go on the street much easier than when you play drama theater. I did lots of dance as well, so I am trained as a dancer and puppeteer back in my life. And then later in 1998, it was shortly after Revolution, it was a breaking point in my life because I did improvised performance with Petr Nikl, which is visual artist in Czech Republic. At that time, we had improvised, let's say, object theater show, and we got many invitations from many countries, and one of the invitations was from South Africa, from Johannesburg. And the obligation was that except of performing there and being at a festival as a guest, performing and showing your show, we had to create a short theater piece with inhabitants from the township. Yes. So we were shocked because we did not know. And then we met 5 people, from that area where normally white people never go, because it's dangerous. And we created a piece. And from that moment, I understood that how theater can help to communicate in the areas where normally you can be killed, because simply they would kill you, because they hated white people for a very good reason, all people. We did not do anything wrong to them, but because of the color of the skin, you had to be very careful that time. So I started something I felt like it's very important for me as a theater maker. And I switched from performing side because I'm trained as a performer originally. I did lots of performance as a performer on the stage. And suddenly I felt very much pulled to the other side to be creator and director, let's say. And from that time, from 1998, unconsciously, I started to be interested in authenticity. And the reason why I do theater is always to pull down the borders between people where normally people could not speak, could not meet, could not simply communicate.
Arca Theatre 響90年代開始積極推動紀錄劇場。2000年之後搞每年一度嘅紀錄劇場節同埋國際紀錄劇場暑期學院，就係因為當時紀錄劇場響英、美、德國等地都再次流行起嚟。經過幾十年鐵幕管治，捷克響革命之後重新開放。劇場總監 Andre 覺得捷克要急起直追。
We were disconnected to the rest of the world for many years, so the ideas about contemporary theaters was very limited to, let's say, 60s. When the revolution came, the idea of what is the modern theater was more like theater of absurd, and people didn't know so much about contemporary performing arts. So what I felt like it's important after the revolution was to build the bridges, to build the bridges between the Czech theater culture and abroad. And by some coincidence, it happened that I was appointed the director of one of the traditional theaters here, and I transformed this theater into the Center for Contemporary Performing Arts.
呢幾位藝術家從事咗紀錄劇場一段時間，到底紀錄劇場有咩咁吸引佢哋，又有咩挑戰呢？
The research is the challenge and the joy, I think, because it's much more interesting when you go and meet new people and speak with the people and do your own research and try to find out how can I combine now all these elements to make a new performance. This is always something that, we always choose topics that are very fascinating. For example, now for this play here with Roma people, everything began last year because the Greek policeman killed one boy who had this Roma origin. He was very poor and he left from a gas station without paying 20 euros for the fuel. And then the police chased him and shot him. And that was a shocking moment for us, like, what is going on, what is happening in this society? And then we said, okay, let's try to develop a piece about this subject of this kind of institution, racism. And then we began interviewing people from very different backgrounds. If you work in the theater, in these institutions, you usually contact a very special group of people. Educated, very, middle class, white, and when we work on these topics, it is very interesting that we go in a research which allows to meet different aspects of the world.
What makes it really significant to me as an experience is the journey that precedes the staging and the journey that follows it. And this has to do with the constitutional elements of documentary theater, human-wise, which are the people that you meet in this process, that are people that have nothing to do with the artistic community with which you're familiar. You talk the same language, it's your colleagues, your partners. It's a totally new and unexplored territory that you can never know where it's going to get you. Because, like I said before, it's all about human interactions. It's all about sharing. It's all about daring. Because I exit my comfort zone as an artist and I enter this field asking people technically to do the impossible, to trust me throughout this journey. And so the impossibility lays in the fact that without having realized it consciously, at the epicenter of my work lies the element of trauma. So I normally touch upon stories and subjects that have a really emotionally loaded or traumatic core to negotiate. So this is something, of course, not to take for granted, and something that calls for the energy and the trust of people that are not familiar with this process. So there is this journey that precedes the staging, and then, which is to me the most important gift that this theater grants me, is the story that follows, the journey that follows. What happens with these interactions? What happens with these meetings? What happens with these new provisional families that we create throughout the process? There is something that stays with us. There is something after this process that alters us, that moves us in an organic way, in a non-always conscious way, to kind of exit our comfort zones, to kind of challenge our beliefs, to revisit our perspectives in a sense. And the second thing, it is a genre, in a sense, that is very inclusive. I think it's the only theater territory that carries this inclusivity. It opens a door and it welcomes people that have nothing to do with our familiar artistic community. This is a gift to us, to the artist. it is very healthy, I insist on that, to kind of exit your bubble.
Yeah.
To reach out to the real world, to people that in real circumstances, most probably you would never have had the option or the possibility to meet.
Yeah, definitely.
Throughout your life.
Yeah.
And to me this is fascinating. And this is something that was revealed to me first because of ethnography, because of social anthropology. And I exit this field, this stage, richer, way richer. And I think that these elements are more than enough to keep me going on this direction. It feels endless to me, that the possibilities feel endless. The possibilities not only in the socio-political realm, but also how they transform into artistic raw material.
Yeah.
The combinations.
紀錄片同紀錄劇場同樣取材自真實，但係各擅勝場。點解唔拍片而選擇以劇場處理佢哋嘅素材呢？
Well, I mean, the first thing I will say is that I'm not a filmmaker, so I don't have money for that. But then, there is a difference between living the experience than watching on Netflix. You have to go to a place, you have to remain silent, and then you have to see people sweating the words and saying what you wrote. The experience is completely different. Probably what happens is that the distribution is less. I mean, a film, you can put it on, on Google Play or whatever, and then, everyone can see it. But the experience is not the same. If you go to a play, the play has more impact because what you're seeing is a human, a real human there, trying his best or her best to do it as truthful as possible. It's acting as well, but a camera you can cut and say, okay, repeat, cut, repeat. Now I use the editing for doing that, color. If you make a mistake on theater, the mistake is going to be seen. So I've been more impacted by plays I've seen.
紀錄劇場可以深入挖掘某一個議題，容納唔同角度，但係有人會質疑劇場觀眾嚟自一個同溫層。觀眾入場前可能已經知道或者認同創作人嘅觀點。Rao 又點回應呢？
I'll buy you a ticket. I'll buy you a ticket. Come and I use this and says I'll buy you a ticket. Go in there, see it, because what other things can I do? I can keep silent, and that is worse, because then those things won't be told. Go there, watch it, come back to me and say you're wrong, and then we start a discussion, and then we start talking, and then we have two people from different poles sitting on a chair or on chairs on a table discussing something that is important for both of them, and then we can agree on some stuff, history or whatever it is. The problem is that if you decide not to go, or I decide not to write the play, the issue remains. So at least I think it's important to document it, to put it, and then invite people, go and see it. I'll go and see yours, and then we will discuss.
紀錄劇場往往關心弱勢處境，但係藝術家係咪真係可以有權代弱勢發聲？
It's a good question. There is also the question of necessity. Like if what we could do is say, well, look, we are not Roma and we will not do a show with Roma people, and let's let them wait. Let's wait and for them to do the show of their own, and that would take 5 years maybe, or 10 years, or maybe it's never going to get done. So we say, okay, we can do it, but how we do it? We have to do it with them. So we have to ask them, okay, we cannot do the piece. And this is also what is interesting about the research that Anestis mentioned, is the fact that you also change during research, and your gaze changes. And the way you see them, the way you see yourself, it changes during research. So what we start, and then we say, okay, what else can we say about you? About what kind of stories do you have? What kind of stories you don't want to tell? What is constructed from my gaze that I have inherited from society, and what is more closer to your truth. And by this quid pro quo, you give me something, there is an exchange, we get closer to what they want to do on stage, but nonetheless they cannot do it themselves because they don't have the experience, they don't have the know-how, they don't know how theater works. Half of them, they've never been outside of the theater. So we have to be there to say, okay, this is from our experience what works and what not, and it's an exchange, let's say, which is very important. So to get rid of the gaze, like for example, if you go back in the 90s, you see films by non-Roma artists who present Roma people as people who have magic powers, who can fly, who can bend spoons, who live outside and they have no problem with it, and it's like a fairy tale. And when you meet people and you meet people and they say, I don't want to live outside. I want a home. I want to have a shower. I want to have a heating. I want to have a bed. I don't want to live outside just because you think I'm a romantic thing from the past.
I asked this question, we were talking about that during our research. Many times we had this question, like, what are we allowed to say and what are we not allowed? I mean, what is our approach as non-Roma creators? And I can remember we were speaking with a Roma lady and she told us it's not important who are you, it is important what are you going to say about us.
「如果唔係 Ernestus 同 Progimus 將希臘羅姆人嘅處境擺入佢哋嘅紀錄劇場創作，俾考察團隊睇到佢哋嘅演出彩排，其實根本唔會察覺當地以至歐洲羅姆人嘅處境。又或者，如果唔係 Martha 訪問咗幾位女兒被男性殺害嘅母親，將佢哋嘅故事放入 Pieta 呢個演出，我哋都唔會察覺響希臘以至歐洲，原來女性仍然受到咁嚴重嘅不平等甚至暴力對待。唔係響布拉格睇咗 Inside You There Are Two Wolves 呢個紀錄劇場演出，我哋真係唔會諗到，原來捷克同越南有一段咁嘅淵源。
We have quite a long history with the Vietnamese community here, because in the communist times they were sent from North Vietnam as apprentices to the factories and to schools here. Usually they told them they will go to school and then they send them to factory. And so some of these Vietnamese stayed here, or they went back to Vietnam. There is a community of Vietnamese people in Hanoi who are meeting almost every week in the pub, and they speak Czech. So there is a sort of like a long way of exchange in Vietnam and Czech Republic. So then, after the revolution, a lot of Vietnamese people came here, and usually they started small business, and they worked on city trades and so on, and they have children. And these children grew up in Czech schools. They speak perfect Czech, but they still have these roots in Vietnamese culture. So the show is actually about confrontation of this, of the faith of these people who were born already here, and they call themselves banana kids, because they like from outside they look Vietnamese, but from inside
they're Czechs.
They already have the roots in Czech culture, and so the show is about this, like two cultures in one body.
所以，正如一開始講，紀錄劇場提供一個好好嘅窗口，俾我哋了解一個時刻、一個地方。但係佢唔止起到記錄嘅作用。西班牙嘅紀錄劇場創作同研究者阿馬杜講得好好，只要我哋希望我哋嘅社會有改變，我哋想要我哋嘅世界變得更加好，紀錄劇場就有佢嘅位置。
Documentary theater is in a way putting on scene your hope of a better world, the need of transformation. I think in Spain, the boom comes from this also, the needs of transformation, because we have this terrible crisis, political, social crisis, well, which is on our world. It's something happening in the whole world, but we feel it from inside, and we look at it every day on TV, on the internet, and in our daily lives. Big problems like housing, for example, or gender violence, things that couldn't be not looked at. You have to turn your gaze to these kind of things, because if not, you are not living. You're not living. I mean, you're looking at your belly only. And in general, society is trying to resist. Of course, I'm maybe talking about half the society, but this is what I live and what people I see, I talk to live. This needs of transformation, needs of non-forgetting, and needs of trying to talk about things in community. This is very important.